Now to an incredible find overseas, an elaborate series of stone monuments believed to have been hidden for thousands of years, not far from the famous site of Stonehenge.
Now, a new analysis shows that the 6-ton iconic altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge originated from northeastern Scotland.
A fresh analysis has revealed something astonishing. The massive 6-ton altar stone at the centre of Stonehenge may have come all the way from northeastern Scotland. Every scan, every measurement, every survey ever recorded was fed into a system designed to catch what human observers might have overlooked. And what came back is the part no one can fully explain, because the data doesn't describe a crude structure raised by simple Neolithic farmers. It points to something far more exact, far more intentional, and far more advanced in its understanding than we've been willing to accept. An impossible monument. Start with its location. Stonehenge rises from the windswept chalk plains of Salisbury, England, about 90 miles southwest of London. It stands alone in open farmland in a way that has unsettled people for centuries. Not because it isn't beautiful, it absolutely is, but because it feels like it doesn't belong there at all. Now look at the structure itself. The outer circle is made of enormous sarsen stones, each towering over 20 feet tall and weighing around 25 tons. These giants were transported from the Marlborough Downs, roughly 20 miles to the north, then carefully shaped and capped with horizontal lintels. And before we go deeper, take a second to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because what comes next challenges everything we thought we knew. And those lintels aren't just placed, they're fitted together using precise joints, mortise and tenon, tongue and groove, techniques you'd expect in fine woodworking, somehow carved into solid rock by people believed to have had no metal tools. Inside that ring are the blue stones, smaller, but still weighing up to 4 tons each, and they came from even farther away, the Preseli Hills in Wales, about 140 miles from the site. No advanced machinery, no wheels capable of carrying that weight, no cranes. Just think about that for a moment. It's the part most people skim past. Even today, moving a single 25-ton stone with precision requires heavy machinery, experienced crews, and serious effort. The standard explanation has always been simple: logs, ropes, earth ramps, and a lot of patience. But that explanation has never quite held up against what actually stands on that plain. And then there's the journey from Wales, hauling 4-ton stones across 140 miles of hills, rivers, and uneven terrain. Entire careers have been spent debating how it was done, but no one questions whether it happened. The stones are there. They made the journey. The real question is why those specific stones were worth moving in the first place. Here's another detail that should give you pause. For centuries, people didn't believe ordinary humans built Stonehenge at all. Medieval accounts credited it to Merlin or even giants because it seemed beyond human capability. Once radiocarbon dating revealed its true age, those stories were dismissed. But this new analysis brings back something unexpected. Not the myths themselves, but the uneasy feeling that we may have been underestimating the builders all along, and the timeline only complicates things further. This wasn't built in a single effort. Construction unfolded in stages between 3000 BCE and 2000 BCE. It began with a circular ditch and bank, followed by 56 mysterious pits known as the Aubrey holes. Then came the towering sarsen trilithons. Later, the blue stones were rearranged multiple times into patterns no one fully understands. And then, around 1600 BCE, the activity stopped. Not abandoned, stopped. And that difference matters more than it seems. You've probably heard the familiar version. Neolithic farmers built it with faith, strength, and generations of effort, a simple human achievement. But when that explanation is tested against 5,000 years of accumulated data and analyzed as a complete system, it starts to fall apart almost immediately. So what changed? In 2026, researchers assembled the most comprehensive dataset on Stonehenge ever created. Every measurement, every geological scan, every astronomical calculation, and every survey conducted over the past 300 years was brought together. The result was enormous, far more information than any single person could process, because despite centuries of study, the data has always been fragmented. Each generation worked with its own tools, challenged previous conclusions, and left behind isolated records. No one ever managed to connect it all. No human could. The sheer volume is overwhelming. That's where the machine came in. For the first time, every piece of data was unified, analyzed together at once. It was fed into Grok, an AI developed by Elon Musk's company xAI, trained across multiple disciplines, including physics, engineering, astronomy, archaeology, and advanced pattern recognition. The instruction it received was almost deceptively simple. Analyze everything and identify what humans, studying in pieces, had consistently missed. And importantly, the researchers didn't guide it toward any specific conclusion. They didn't ask it to confirm existing theories or choose between competing ideas. They simply asked it to look at the full picture and tell them what didn't fit. They instructed it to remain completely neutral, no bias, no assumptions, just report what the data itself revealed. That detail is important. Humans tend to search for patterns they already expect to find. Grok wasn't doing that. It was told to identify whatever truly existed, whether it matched expectations or not. And the first place it looked was unexpected. When a person visits Stonehenge, their attention goes straight to the towering stones, the iconic centerpiece seen on every postcard. But Grok ignored them. It focused, instead, on the holes, the overlooked features most people treat as background details. That choice turned out to be the first sign it was analyzing the site in a completely different way. The 56 pits, known as the Aubrey holes, these pits form a ring just inside the outer earthwork. They were first identified in the 17th century and named after antiquarian John Aubrey. For centuries, they were dismissed as secondary features. Some contained cremated remains, others were empty, and the uneven spacing between them was often attributed to crude workmanship, Neolithic builders doing what they could with simple tools. Nothing remarkable. Grok disagreed immediately. Here's what it did. Using compiled survey data, it measured the spacing between all 56 holes with extreme precision, down to fractions of a millimeter. Then it mapped the distances between each neighboring pair around the entire circle. What everyone assumed would be random wasn't. Instead of irregular gaps, the spacing formed a smooth, repeating pattern, a sinusoidal wave, and that wave closely matched the mathematical model describing the Moon's shifting orbit over the 18.6-year lunar nodal cycle. In other words, the spacing between those holes appears to encode the Moon's maximum and minimum positions in the sky over that entire cycle. To verify it, astronomer Dr. Jennifer Walsh was brought in. According to the account, she watched as the data resolved on her screen, the plotted points settling neatly into that wave pattern. She paused, reran the analysis, and then stated her conclusion clearly. The correlation between the Aubrey hole spacing and lunar orbital mechanics is statistically overwhelming. The likelihood of this occurring by chance is effectively zero. Think about what that really means. This isn't a simple alignment you could notice by casually observing the horizon. This is orbital behavior translated into physical distances, laid out with centimeter-level accuracy across a 100-meter wide circle. It suggests that around 5,000 years ago, someone understood the moon's motion at a level that wouldn't be formally described in Western science until the time of Kepler in the 17th century, and they recorded that knowledge directly into the ground. Then Grock addressed a question that had lingered for centuries. Why exactly 56 holes? Because 56 is 3 times the lunar nodal cycle. Multiply 18.6 by 3 and you get 55.8, rounded to 56. That ring isn't random. It functions as a triple-cycle lunar calculator, a system capable of tracking the moon's motion across nearly 56 years, a full timeline of the sky, embedded in the Earth. Now pause for a moment. If the idea of a ring of pits acting as a working lunar calculator already has your attention, this is only the beginning. Compared to what comes next, this discovery almost feels simple, because this is where the story starts to move beyond traditional archaeology. Consider what it would take to gather the data needed to create that pattern in the first place. To track the moon's full cycle, someone would have had to observe its rising and setting points over nearly 2 decades, carefully comparing each observation to previous ones, with enough precision to detect shifts most people would never notice. That's not the work of a single observer. That's a chain of observers. Knowledge passed from one person to another over years, possibly decades, long before a single pit was ever dug. What we see in the ground is the final step of a much longer process. The actual work began in human memory, across generations, and once it was carved into the chalk, it didn't need its creators anymore. The moon could disappear behind clouds. The builders themselves could be long gone. It wouldn't matter. The system would continue to function, permanently encoded in the spacing of those holes. 5,000 years later, it's still there, still accurate, still waiting for someone with the right tools to recognize that it was never random. That's the difference between simply watching the sky and building a lasting model of it. One stops the moment clouds block the sky. The other only ends when the structure itself is gone. Because as soon as Grock shifted its focus from the pits to the standing stones, the Aubrey holes, strange as they are, started to seem almost straightforward by comparison. The sound machine. Grock analyzed every measurable detail of the sarsen stones, their positions, heights, angles, density, the curvature of the circle, and the precise placement of each lintel. Then it reconstructed the monument, as it once stood, complete and intact, and ran full acoustic simulations. What it found was unexpected. Stonehenge behaves like a resonant chamber, a 3-dimensional structure designed to manipulate sound. Its geometry naturally produces standing waves at specific frequencies, with the strongest concentrated in the infrasound range between 95 and 120 Hz. And here's where everything shifts. That frequency range sits just below what humans can consciously hear. You could stand inside the circle and hear nothing unusual, but your body would still respond. Modern studies show that infrasound between 95 and 120 Hz can influence human perception in powerful ways, triggering altered states of consciousness, intense emotional reactions, even visual hallucinations. It can affect heart rate, brain activity, and push the mind toward trance-like states. According to the simulation, the structure of Stonehenge amplifies exactly those frequencies whenever sound is produced inside the ring. To confirm it, acoustic engineer Dr. Marcus Chin was brought in. He ran the same simulations independently, expecting to uncover an error. Instead, the results held. His conclusion was direct. Achieving this level of acoustic precision is extraordinary. Today, engineers rely on advanced mathematics and computer modeling to control sound this precisely. Stonehenge does it using carefully arranged stone, and the clearest sign this wasn't accidental is consistency. Random echoes happen under specific conditions, in specific spaces, and often only once. But this isn't random. The same frequency range appears repeatedly, regardless of the sound source, and the strongest effects consistently occur at fixed points within the circle. Accidents don't produce that kind of reliability. This does. Now imagine standing inside it when it was active. Drums, chanting, voices, sound filling the space. You wouldn't consciously hear the low-frequency layer beneath it, but you'd feel it, in your chest, behind your eyes, in that part of your mind that decides whether a place feels ordinary or sacred. For someone inside, unaware of the mechanics, this wouldn't feel like architecture. It would feel like something else entirely, like the space itself was alive, reaching back. And then it gets even more unsettling. Grok discovered that the acoustic field isn't uniform. It forms concentrated zones, specific nikat, inside the circle where the infrasound effect peaks. The AI mapped those nikat precisely and then compared them with archaeological records. They matched the locations where cremated human remains were found. That alignment is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. If the remains had been randomly placed, it might mean nothing, but they aren't. They cluster exactly where the acoustic intensity is highest, which suggests intent. Someone understood where those effects were strongest and chose those exact locations for burial. That changes how we interpret the site. For years, these burials were seen as honored dead, resting in a sacred space. But this pattern suggests something more calculated. The remains sit at the nikat of maximum influence, the places where the structure would have had the strongest effect on a living person. Why? It's unclear. Maybe those positions were reserved for the most important individuals in ritual ceremonies, or maybe they marked the most extreme points of the experience, places where the effects were overwhelming, even dangerous. The stones don't explain which. Whether those individuals died naturally during intense rituals or were exposed repeatedly to forces they couldn't fully understand, the evidence doesn't say. But on one point, the analysis is clear. This was not a passive place of quiet worship. It was an active system, something designed to interact with human consciousness and alter it. And then there are the blue stones. Those same stones transported over 140 miles from Wales. For decades, archaeologists have wondered why those specific stones were worth such an effort. Grok's answer has nothing to do with distance or transport. It's about what those stones do. When the AI examined their composition, a pattern emerged, one that points directly to sound. They weren't chosen randomly. They were chosen for their sound. Strike a blue stone, and it doesn't just make noise. It rings, a clear, sustained tone. And each one produces a slightly different pitch depending on its size, shape, and composition. These stones weren't simply taken from a quarry in Wales. They were selected with purpose. Grok's analysis revealed something striking. The stones form a harmonic system. Their tones align in precise mathematical relationships, what musicians would recognize as a pentatonic scale, the same five-note pattern found in ancient music across the world. That means someone wasn't just building, they were listening. Someone stood in those Welsh hills, striking stones, testing them, and choosing only the ones that fit together. Not just an engineer, not just an astronomer, someone with an ear for harmony. They were tuning the monument before it was even built. And the placement of those stones is just as deliberate. Each blue stone sits on a specific acoustic point within the larger Sarsen circle. When the outer stones generate low-frequency resonance, the blue stones respond, vibrating in sync. The outer ring creates the bass frequency. The blue stones layer the harmonics on top. Together, they form a carefully tuned environment designed to affect the human body. That's how resonance works. Strike one frequency, and another object tuned to it begins to vibrate on its own. Build that effect into stone, and the entire structure starts to respond to sound, amplifying it, sustaining it, sending it back. To anyone inside, it wouldn't feel like sound bouncing off rock. It would feel like the stones were answering. Think about the effort behind that. Someone identified specific tones in individual rocks, selected them, and transported them 140 miles just to assemble a precise acoustic system. That's not guesswork, that's design. Which leads to a bigger conclusion. This wasn't built piece by piece over time. It was planned as a complete system from the beginning. Acoustic, astronomical, everything working together. You don't arrive at that by accident across generations. Someone started with a plan. That raises the question, how did they already know all of this? Grok looked beyond Stonehenge, and everything changed, because Stonehenge isn't the whole structure. It's the center of something much larger. Across the landscape lies a hidden network, hundreds of mounds, paths, and earthworks. From the ground, it looks random. From above, it forms a precise geometric design. Straight lines, alignments, massive shapes stretching for kilometers. This wasn't accidental, it was planned, on a scale no one on the ground could fully see. And the precision is staggering. Points placed kilometers apart, aligned within meters, without tools, without writing. Even more surprising, the timeline. Some parts date back to 3,500 BCE. The design came first, Stonehenge came later, which means this plan was carried across generations, accurately for centuries. That shouldn't be possible, but it happened. And then comes the real mystery. The pattern runs backward. The earliest work is the most precise. Later additions drift, weaken, lose accuracy. It didn't improve over time. It declined. The first builders already understood everything, and whatever they knew was slowly being lost. The numbers make that clear. Early stones missed the perfect acoustic position by just 3.2 centimeters. Later ones drift to 12.7 centimeters. That's not just sloppy work. That's the difference between true understanding and a memory of it. Like a song passed down too many times, still recognizable, but stripped of meaning. We tend to think the past was primitive, and knowledge improved over time. But here, the evidence points the other way. The first builders were the most skilled. Everyone after them was trying and failing to match something they didn't fully understand. They weren't discovering. They were forgetting. Even the stones show it. Early work is precise, later work rough. As if the knowledge faded over time. The oldest parts are the most perfect. The newest, the weakest. Time moved forward. Understanding moved backward. This wasn't progress. It was loss. And yet they built something massive to preserve it. Because everything here points to one idea. Cycles. The sun, the moon, sound, even slow celestial shifts over centuries. This wasn't just a monument. It was a system to track time itself. Not one cycle, many, all layered together. Which means they weren't waiting for something simple. They were waiting for a moment, when everything aligned. But aligned for what? We don't know. Around 1600 BCE, they didn't abandon it. They sealed it. Carefully. Not panic. Preservation. They knew the knowledge was slipping away, so they saved the system, hoping someone else would understand. That someone is us. And now, after 5,000 years, we're finally starting to read it. Not as the beginning of knowledge, but as its end. A final message from a world that was already forgetting.